Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Musician with Andrew Hitz, a podcast from the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network featuring interviews with the best and brightest entrepreneurs and innovators in the music business. Today's episode features Patrick Sheridan, soloist, writer, educator, and creator of The Breathing Gym. He is both a former member of the President's Own Marine Band and has an MBA from the University of Michigan. Not exactly a common combination in the music business. He tells us all about it next. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Entrepreneurial Musician Podcast. Today I am pleased to be joined by my dear friend Patrick Sheridan, who is a tuba player, is a businessman, is an entrepreneur, is a teacher, a conductor, a composer, and arranger. His resume is long enough that it's annoying for those of us who are not as accomplished. So how are you this morning, Pat?
Excellent. This is third time's the charm, right? It took us a few times to get this to go down.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I will say that the first time that we had the interview lined up, I got on Skype and Pat wasn't on there, and then I texted him, and then I texted him again, and then it turned out that it was too late for him because he had passed out on the couch, and the interview was scheduled for 8 p.m. his time. So that's pretty funny. Now, the flip side of that is that it's 6:15 in the morning there, and he's already been doing stuff, and he's one of those annoying morning people. So, all right. So Pat is one of my heroes in the music business. I try not to tell him that because it makes him difficult to deal with. But in terms of the number of things that he's created and the directions that he's taken, a whole lot of stuff, and I kind of tried to model a lot of my I've tried unsuccessfully to model my playing after yours as well, but I was specifically referencing, trying to model like the business side of things after what you've done. So you started in the President's Own Marine Band at age 20. Is that right?
That's right.
Wow. And then how long were you in the Marine Band?
I was there 4 years, from 1989 to 1993.
And so why did you leave?
Why did I leave? That's a good question. I think that from the outset, what I thought the job was far different than what it was. So that part surprised me. It was at that moment in the history of the band, it was the young guys did the young guy work. So we were basically, I would say 65, sometimes 70% of the time professional sousaphone players playing about the same 7 or 8 tunes, and that's what that job is. I think there's a better balance between the side and the ceremonial side now than there used to be, but at that moment in time there was. So that was a pretty large pill to swallow, that I'd worked as hard as I was, playing sousaphone for Eternal Father. And for me, in saying that now, the unfortunate part is what I missed being 20, 21, 22, 23 while I was there was Harry Waters puts this really great. It was about being able to have the opportunity to serve in the ceremonial band in the Army, and being able to be there for a family and provide that music at that moment in their life. And I never thought of it that way. I was just pissed that I had to have a sousaphone on, and you know what I mean, and it was hot or it was cold, and that I wasn't playing cool wind band music. So that was, I would say, within the first 24 hours, my decision had been made that I was going to do my term and then I was going to leave. That's pretty much how that story goes. There's more detail to that, but it doesn't really bear repeating. It was a bad first day, and
that's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a different phone call.
That's
sure.
one that we'll do when we're all retired.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people got to die before I talk about that.
Yeah. Oh,
anyway,
that's funny.
But the thing that I, was driving towards was wanting to be able to do what I wanted to do in music, and while they gave me a wonderful launching pad as a soloist, and great opportunities to stand in front of a group, which I wouldn't have had received in any other, certainly in an orchestral situation, I get a chance to stand up and be as a tuba soloist more than about once every 10 years, maybe, if maybe even less, maybe a little less if you're a frequent soloist, quote unquote, with an orchestra. So that's really what I wanted, and I knew the Marine Band long term wasn't going to provide that for me. So,
sure.
it was easy to make a decision to sort of change directions.
Yeah, just last month, or I guess it was the end of March, when Carol Jansch soloed with Philadelphia Orchestra, which she's a member of course. She was the first tuba soloist to play on a subscription series concert in that orchestra's history, which I believe goes back to the 1880s. So it's not really it's not a reliable solo outlet. So cool. So you did something about it. That's kind of a theme, actually, of your career, is that, and of a lot of people's careers that I'm figuring out in the music business, is when something's not there for them, that they make it appear. Did you go to get your MBA straight out of the Marine Band?
Yeah, I was born of a matter of practicality. I felt like, I was so young, and I probably, I was one of those people that it would have been good for me to have stayed in school, I think, a little bit longer with the folks that I was around, so that I would have had a little bit more time to talk about the things that you do when you leave school. It was all about get a gig.
Right.
And all the other things I didn't really pick up on or learn about. So, there were many avenues of opportunity in the music business that I could have taken, but I don't think I knew, the music industry side, for example. I just either didn't consider it or didn't know about it. I thought when I was in the Marine Band, okay, I've got basically two choices. I can play in a military band, or I can play in an orchestra, so play in an ensemble, or I can go teach at a university. And when I was making these considerations, I was 21, I was just barely reached the legal drinking age, and I was like trying to think about how am I going to make this happen? And so I in my little 4-valve brain, all I could make happen was, listen, I can be a soloist on the weekend, and I can get a day job and go to work, and I can be a weekend warrior on the tuba, and if it ever breaks out and I could make it work financially, then I would, and if it doesn't, then then I got to do something else. And so I had looked at, okay, I have an undergrad degree in tuba performance, not worth the ink or the paper it's printed on. So what am I going to do with that? I mean, I can tell you the number of times when I was in business school that I took interviews for summer internships or for a gig where the interviewer would look across and you go, okay, so Bachelor of Music, explain that to me. And then you'd explain all the things that you did. And it's like, so you basically left high school to go to a university, you paid them money so that you could sit in a room and practice, and they would give you a degree that said that you practice well.
Well, that's one way to sum it up.
And that's pretty much the way a business person looks at that degree.
Right.
And I would say that has not changed one bit.
Right.
And while maybe myopic to a degree, only in that the curriculum that you could possibly interface with wouldn't offer you, this other avenue of thinking about marketing or finance or business planning or any of that kind of stuff. That would be the best option for me, was to the MBA is a terminal degree, and it's all comers. It's in terms of you don't have to have an undergrad in business. You can have an undergrad in whatever. You have to have work experience to get into a great business program. And so that for me was the way I could get in. I was like, oh, well, I've been a sousaphone player for 4 years. So I should study marketing. And the business schools, they bought it. I scored it well enough on the assessment test and all that other kind of stuff. So I was afforded the ability to go to school to study this, and I was in with the intent of leaving the business. I was going to go do something else. And in hindsight, I wish I'd gone back. I wish I'd done this degree when I was 10 years into my career. Because that's about where everybody was that I was in school with, and they had so much more to offer the classes, because the graduate degree is based on practical information, practical application of information. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I didn't have any practical information to apply. It was like, oh yeah, I've been managing my sousaphone and my valve oil supply.
Third valve is a great replacement for 1 and 2 if you're sharp.
Yeah, exactly. This is the information that I had at my fingertips, not like the cats that I sat next to who were, oh yeah, I've owned a strip mall and I'm worth $7.5 million and I'm here for real estate development, or this guy's been a vice president at Ford and he's 38 years old, and I was 24 when I was in business school. I was like, oh man. So for me it was a scramble, but it was to try to change careers. And when you read it in the bio, or people, well, that's how they, find the information out about you. Sorry, excuse me. They assume that I did it to stay in music, and that's actually not why I went to business school. I went to change directions to give me a way to make money so I could afford a tuba career as a soloist. Huh. So I wasn't intending to come back to music in any other way other than hanging out on the weekends, being a soloist.
Interesting.
And so that was the genesis of that. And then, I got out, and it was, I missed the music part so bad that it didn't take long for me to come rolling back. It was less than a year. And I was, determined to try to figure out a way to navigate, being able to afford being a soloist. And in the beginning, the only reason I could afford being a soloist was my ex-wife now, but my wife at the time was working. She had a good job. We lived real cheap, and I just went to her and said, listen, how much do I got to bring in a month? And went out and sent my bio out to a whole bunch of high schools. We were living in Chicago at the time, and said, hey, I'm available for lessons, and had like 80 students, and snuck away on the weekends every once in a while to do a recital. Right. And that's how it started. But it was, I think that sort of tangential experience in the MBA program gave me was this ability to separate my feelings for, hey, I need to play this for you, and you need to think this is important because this is a great work of art by a great artist. Right. And allowed me to sort of take that on a shelf and be completely unemotional about that and look at it from a completely, always 100% of the time, completely sterile business aspect in terms of every part of what I do, including what pieces I play and whom I play them for. I get down to that kind of critical level because in the end, if you're going to be successful as a soloist, the only thing that matters is connection. You have to be able to emotionally connect with this. In fact, that's the same as a teacher. Yeah.
Chamber music. Yeah, it's all.
Yeah, it's the whole deal. You have to be able to. Connection is the most important thing. And so the going to business school and looking at every kind of different business scenario and different case, and then using all the different tools that you have in the business area, financial tools and marketing tools and organizational behavioral tools and all of the variety of things that we took as classes in school present themselves daily. And so that's, for me, that was I think the thing that has helped propel me more than, and being just a stubborn, more than anything else, which is that I'm not so sure I was that way anyway, but I don't spend much time in any sort of lofty artistic thinking. Maybe that's a shame, but I can't afford it. Right. I have to be thinking very critically, business wise, all the time to navigate my way in a life that has no guarantees. There's not anybody putting any money in a pension for me. There isn't anybody looking for gigs for me. It's just me. I create my day every day, and that it's nice to have those tools and not be sitting around going, man, I don't understand why nobody's booking me to play that 45-minute concerto with their orchestra. And then be an angry artist about it.
That's an easy trap to fall into, isn't it?
Well, it can be. It can be for sure. And I think that's the thing that the MBA thing's been for me. It's like that's what it was, and that's how I've used it going forward. It's like, hey man, it completely ended it for me actually, because I sat there and every experience I had during business school at the University of Michigan, in every class was clinical. It was always clinical. It was never emotional. And when it got emotional, the professors would just laugh at you and go, what's the matter with you? You can't act like that. There's the data says this, so I don't really care that you're a little left toe is wiggling at the side of a cherry tree. The data says this is how it goes, so go with the data.
Right.
And that kind of conditioning in school, man, when I got out and it was like, okay, it's time to become a soloist. Okay, what's the first thing I got to do? Okay, well, I got to pay some bills. Okay, honey, how much money do you need? Okay, great. How can I do that? Okay, that much money divided by this many hours. I think I can go find that many students. Okay, let's go find that many. It was like everything was, and then I got myself settled. So it's like, okay, I can survive on the student thing. I can fulfill my obligation financially to the family. So now I can go figure out in every other moment ways of trying to branch out. And, this idea of being diversified is the thing for me is that has allowed me to survive in a business that's super. It's ephemeral. It's changing constantly,
Yes.
Which is that I don't just do one thing. And our great mentor and friend, Sam Palafian, sort of put it to me real straight, probably 30 years ago. He's like, listen, man, Leonard Bernstein's not that. He's not some sort of thing to be lauded and put up on a pedestal. He's like, he's just a complete musician. He's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be writing. We're supposed to be conducting. We're supposed to be teaching. We're supposed to be performing. You want to be a musician, that's a complete musician. That's what you're supposed to do. Don't put him on a pedestal. Do what he did. Huh. And that's, I could say that's, when one opportunity goes away, there are so many other different ways to make a living. So I know it's like, oh, he works as a tuba soloist. Well, that's the public, that's what, you see the most. But, I definitely work as much as a teacher and spend as many hours in the day thinking about, writing,
right,
arranging, conducting, as I do any of the other things that I do. So, I think that's what business school did for me. It's really compartmentalize, be critical, and be clinical, and leave your emotions at the door, and pick them up when it's time to walk on stage and perform. But otherwise, you don't need them.
Isn't it interesting that I think one of the real conundrums, I'll use a big word, that music students face is that if they're going to compete against the likes of you to win a job with the President's Own Marine Band, then it's pretty hard / close to impossible to do that if they're not 100% all in on completely devouring excerpts and sight reading and all of the skills that you need. And yet all of the skills that you just talked about that you learned in business school and that you've since applied and, leaving emotion out of it and being clinical and being intentional with your direction and then with, the pedaling in that direction are all, in a lot of ways, are polar opposite skills to the skills that you need to beat Pat Sheridan or to beat Lauren Veroni in a euphonium audition or to beat Carol Jansch in an orchestral audition. So, and it's hard to do both things simultaneously. Yeah, interesting.
I would say it's hard to do both things simultaneously, but I would also say that, there were skills that I picked up before going to business school that were business skills. And business school just helped me label them.
Sure.
And go, oh yeah, I should be using that idea or that skill rather than, and that's because I, was early on allowed to get a gig and go work. I fell in love with Empire Brass and Canadian Brass when I was like 9 years old, and so I bought all the music that I could get my hands on, and had a quintet, and was looking for work in my early in my teens. We were rehearsing I had a junior high brass quintet, and we were looking for places to play, and my parents have always had they're ballroom dancing teachers, so they always had this sort of side business besides my mom was a teacher and a nurse and my dad was a businessman. They always had a side business of teaching dancing, and then for a while they were making all these badges and stuff that dancers wear, for their name tags and stuff. So they had an extra side business, and I was kind of raised in a bit of an environment where hey, I know your job only pays this much, but there's other hours in the day where you could be doing things to generate money if that's what you're looking for. And I think that message stuck for me early on. It's like, hey man, you're in charge of your day. So if you want to work, then you got to figure out how you got to go sell yourself to somebody to do something. I worked all the way through college and and if sort of. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing about getting it all done, because I definitely had moments of specialization. Like I was very intense about playing when I was in college. As soon as I got out of business school and I came back to being soloing, then every free moment I had in every single day was sitting in front of Finale writing, generating charts for myself to be able to go play that I knew would connect with an audience emotionally, not the stuff that was available that had been commissioned and written by wonderful people and great artists, but it doesn't allow for a tuba to connect emotionally with people. And I somehow lucked out and figured that out early on too, that I can't, there's not enough work in the world to go play Hindemith and Von Williams and Gregson. I wish there was,
sure.
But we are not at that part of the evolution of our instrument yet as a solo instrument.
This is very true.
And so that's not a part of the deal, and that's fine.
Something that you said right at the beginning of the of talking about business school was that that you figured out what paraphrasing here, but that business school helped to teach you to figure out what your customers want and what is going to connect with them, and then you do that, and that's something I think that's lacking from a lot of the educations that we offer to musicians and artists these days, is that it's kind of the if you're great, then they will come, which is on some level still a little bit true if you play the violin or you play the piano and you're playing Beethoven and Mozart, and if those works all disappeared tomorrow, then there would be an uproar amongst a whole lot of people who pay all the money into the endowments of orchestras and concert series. But if all brass solo music disappeared tomorrow, there'd be an uproar, but not on the same level and from the same people who kind of control the industry, and so you gotta. And so what did you do? You created, and you figured out what was going to connect, and some of your, the something that Pat's famous for, if you don't know him as a performer, is that he comes out on stage in a bumblebee, costume, and how fast do you do the flight of the bumblebee in?
It's a minute.
Yeah, it's a minute. Yeah. And it's crazy virtuosic, and it's completely over the top slapstick, but it's great, and you sell it, and it's like you have a very clear goal of how you're trying to connect to the audience. Now, he can also play Danny Boy with phrasing and note releases and all the expensive stuff that will bring a tear to your eye. And he does that on the same program, which is that's connection, that's connection. But it's cool to hear that stuff is not all accidental. You figure out what works, and I'm guessing that through your career that you've thought that some stuff was going to really connect with an audience, and then it didn't quite connect as much, and then you've kind of pulled the plug on it or changed it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things like that. Probably the most obvious one that was the biggest shock to me was I spent a lot of time learning how to do all this crazy triple tonguing stuff, and playing all these old cornet and euphonium war horses like Hailstorm and Concert Polka and all the theme and variation tunes. And being able to learn how to triple tongue really fast and hopefully clear enough for you to be able to consume a tuba sound, right? And I found that when I would go out to play those types of pieces at a brass festival, at any kind of festival where the audience is an educated listener of brass instruments, that they would go completely berserk. They would they lose their mind. If I go out and do some sort of crazy technical triple tongue thing where there are trumpet players in the audience, everybody goes completely nuts. If I do that same exact piece, let's take Hailstorm, for example, or the variations on a Tyrolean theme, and I perform that in front of an audience that's not an educated brass listener, those pieces fall flat because they hear the repeated triplet. They hear that as being some sort of bubbly or interruption of a clear tone. They don't hear that as being this wild technical thing that it is. And I checked it out really quickly, like, wow, I play that piece. And when I would play that at a conference, there'd be, people be throwing stuff on the stage, and, there'd be offers of all sorts of things. Please take my child, please marry me, blah, blah, blah.
Take my child.
Right, and train him into the tonguer that you have become. And if I were to go play that in a high school auditorium for a community concert audience, the piece falls flat. And at the same time, a piece like Chartist, where the technique moves around and it's not all on the same note,
right?
They consume that as being highly virtuosic. And so, yeah, there are certain pieces I play at brass festivals that I don't play anywhere else because they're the only people on the planet that appreciate it for what it is. And I would say that's how I was early on. I would say anymore, it's really not that. I mean, you heard the program that I played in January, and there's a lot of slow music on there and a lot of reflective music, and that's indicative of my age of 46. You know, it's a different place in my life than I was previous.
You are on the downslope a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I got the top of the apex and put my skis on, and I'm to the bottom, man. So.
Yeah, it's along the lines of and your MBA was had an emphasis in both financing but also marketing. In particular, marketing is something that I'm quite interested in, and I've all the books and talks and all that I've consumed in some parallel life. I'd love to get an MBA in marketing, but with all the things I have going on, including having a 1-year-old, I'm not looking to abandon my family to get an MBA. So it's just kind of doing a free MBA on my own, which doesn't get me the piece of paper, but that's okay. But Trident, a long time ago, the gum, they decided that 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Trident. They figured out that that's resonating with the people that buy their gum. And my guess is that it's mainly parents who are buying it for their kids. And yes, sugar-free is on there, but that's the tagline, right? That's been the tagline since I was a little kid. I mean, so we're talking like, and probably before that. So it's been 3 or 4 decades, and they figure out that they don't talk about other ingredients. They don't talk about it lasting a long time. It's resonant with their audience. And what I've heard said many times, either as instruction or just experiential, like you just said, is that you can't. You're going to have zero luck at all getting your audience up to speed on how impressed they should be by what you're doing, or that you should like. I don't think you understand. Like, this took me thousands of hours, and Chartist took me like 20 hours to learn, and this other Hailstorm took me 1,200, and so you should as Seth Godin says, nobody cares how hard you work. You don't get graded on effort. So it's all about or difficulty or execution. You nailed it. It's connection. Whether it's with a product like the breathing gym, or whether it's from the stage, or with one student sitting next to you in a lesson, or as the director of the wind ensemble at UCLA, as you used to be, or all of it. Yeah, it's all about human interactions and human connections. So, good stuff. Can you talk about the breathing gym, which, for those of you who don't know, is a breathing curriculum, I guess is what I would call it. That's both a book and then also a few different DVDs. And what I'm wondering is, Pat and I are both former students of Sam Palafian, who's the tuba player now in Boston Brass and used to be in the Empire Brass, and has a very long resume. He's even been on Mr. Rogers. And I guess you could mention Pink Floyd as well. But he's got a long, very interesting resume. You cannot repeat yourself and talk for about 5 minutes about the stuff that he's done. But when Pat and I were younger, when we were still on the upslope of our lives and careers, the breathing gym stuff, it wasn't called the breathing gym, and it was all breathing exercises that not that Sam came up with all of them, but that a lot of it he did, but a lot of it he just kind of curated from around and just kind of, everybody knows how to breathe, but he made it into a method. And it used to be on these, there was a couple of versions that people took notes of in master classes and then photocopied, and then those got distributed all over the place. And I still have some of my old photocopies from a master class in Boston, and I think it was like the mid 80s that I got the photocopies in the late 80s. And then somehow you and he decided to make this into a product, and also added a whole lot of stuff from the photocopies. Of course, you didn't just format it and sell it. But can you talk about how did you get the idea to come up with that? And then how did that process kind of? You obviously identified, and very successfully, because it's all over the place with marching bands and with choirs and with bands and with individuals and private teachers and all sorts of stuff. So can you talk about how you identified a customer base that had a need that you guys could meet, and then kind of how the whole project came together?
Sure. Well, that's a loaded question.
That's what I'm here for, Pat.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get loaded. That we had two different pathways into the breathing bit. Sam's comes from a place of being not he has I would say he has average size lungs for his average frame, which
Sure.
is to say it's less than a 4-liter vital capacity, and mine is just over 7. So we're coming at it that playing the tuba from two different angles. His is from like how to power up and hang in a group that was, you know, Rolf Smedvig and Jeff Kernow or Tim Morrison or, you know, Charlie Lewis and Dave Ohanian. I mean, Marty Hackelman, like big blowers. Norm Bolter in the beginning, like giant tones.
Sure.
And so he was looking for ways to make sure that he was air efficient to be able to do what he needed to do to cover the holes that he had to make as a breather. I was coming to it from this thing of going to study with Arnold Jacobs, and I'd played nothing but E-flat tuba my whole life, and I had played C tuba, but I didn't have any concept for making large volume of sound as an orchestral person. And so that I found myself ill-equipped to be able to do what I needed to do for Mr. Jacobs by just knowing how my body was put together and aligning it the right way. I could breathe better, but I couldn't do what I needed to do. I felt there needed to be some sort of clinical training. So when I left the Marine Band, went to get so now we roll forward. That was 86 to 87, 88 was when I was in college. Then I roll forward about 10 years, a little bit less than that. I'm done with the MBA. I'm coming back into music. Sam's coming into town, and he's like, hey, man, we're doing the Symphonia recording. I think this is in December of 1995. And the first one. And I'm going to be in town. I think Sam was the president of TUBA at the time. And so he's like, hey, I need a place to crash, and let's hang out. And I was like, oh, great, because we've been friends for a long time, and I, still had not quite stepped back into music completely. And so we're buzzing our mouthpiece, and we're talking about all these different things. And I'm like, hey, man, I got to do these breathing things. I've been in business school for 2 years, and I always do this before I go play in the brass band at Battle Creek. Tell me what you think. And we're doing these exercises, and he goes, hey, man, that's cool. Have you checked this one out? And then then ensued this. It's like two guys with baseball cards that didn't know each other had those that affliction.
Right.
It's like, oh my God, you're into that too?
That's
cool.
great.
Let me show you what I got. There was a large amount of common ground, and then there was a lot of things that were, I would say, I was doing as a big guy to try to chill stuff out, and he was doing as a little guy to try to power things up. So there were some areas that were more based on our size and our needs.
Sure.
Versus sort of general needs. And it was cool. And so I got back into music, and then I found right away that for me as a soloist, that was really not how I got into being a soloist. I got into being a soloist and getting asked to come around and play my tuba because I could teach well. And this came from this having great teachers,
right.
Parentoni, Jim Self, Arnold Jacobs, Sam Palafian, of course. I never in a formal setting with Sam, but of course Sam, Ross Tolbert, the Minnesota Orchestra. I mean, I only had Jerry Young. I only had the very greatest teachers.
Yeah, we're both pretty spoiled in that department.
Yeah, I mean, like the very best information all the time. It was that was the entry point for me, and having a methodology that was simple and based on do methods rather than the don't do methods was really important to me. Now you roll forward 20 years and that it's all over the place, I think, is indicative of a couple of things. This goes to your question about how did you identify a need. I don't think we did. I think that we had we'd go somewhere, we'd go in the room, appoint a scribe, hey, write down what I say, and then we'll copy it for everybody at the end of the clinic, right? I learned that from Sam. Because we both saw him do it, right? Yep. So then I'd be somewhere in a foreign country, and I'd be in Finland and say, hey, write this down in Finnish, and then I'd copy it, and I'd keep a copy. So the next time I go back to Finland, I just copy the Finnish version and hand it out, Right. Or whatever language it was. And so then Sam and I started trading this stuff back and forth, and we had this, disorganized, typical tuba player, like, stained, messy, crumpled up packet of stapled thing that had been stapled and unstapled 1,000 times. We'd hand it to some kid and go find the right language and copy that.
Hey, I need to interrupt for just a second with a really
Sure.
funny story. At the Northeast Regional Tuba Euphonium Conference last month in Ithaca, I saw Roger Bobo, which was the first time that I had spoken to him in 20 years, actually. He came to Northwestern and did a recital and a master class. And I said, hello, Mr. Bobo. It's great to see you again. And I said, you may actually remember me from 20 years ago, and here's why. I said I went to play the Vaughan Williams for you. This is not noteworthy. How many people have played the Vaughan Williams for Roger Bobo in a masterclass in his life? I mean, it's probably like tens of thousands. And I said, but before I started, I said, you said, wait a minute, and then you held up the music to the audience because half of it was covered in a red wine stain. and he said, I remember you. And he said that was hilarious. And I said, yeah, I thought you might remember that. So anyway, yeah, as you said, typical stained pages of a tuba player. So that just went down. So anyway, continue your story.
It was a disorganized mess. So
sure.
It was anyway, I was getting more and more interested in having, merch.
Right.
And so it was like, hey, man, we got to make a publication out of this. We got to find someone, and then we can sell it ourselves. Because that was, the end of the 90s, early 2000s was still really like heyday for CDs.
Sure.
So the more stuff you could drag with you in a suitcase on the road, the
right.
more money you'd come home with.
Absolutely.
And I was like, well, we got all these products and we have CDs, great, but we need some other things, so we got to do this. And,
here's the NBA kicking in.
So we shopped around, and every major publisher in the country turned us down. They're like, nah, there's nothing there. And so there's Tim Lotzenheiser was at that point the owner of Focus on Excellence, this little Indiana tiny little company that he had as one of his things that he has, and he's like, hey, we'll put it out, we'll do this, and I was like, okay, great, because I just need someone to print the stuff or make it to DVD so I can buy it from you and so I can sell it. I want to be, the roving storefront. And so he had an employee named David Madera, who's a wonderful gentleman, very dutiful, very extremely organized, and beautifully patient because he had to deal with Sam and I. It's like 2 brains, 8 valves, and several missing chromosomes
and half a clue.
Right? Yeah, not even. And a packet, a stapled, stained packet. Like, hey, let's make a book from this.
By the way, this is in Finnish, and I need you to translate it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Good luck with that. No, that's not wine. That's blood. Right? Exactly.
Family-friendly podcast. Family-friendly podcast.
So David was really great. He got us organized and sort of put it into a format and set all the organizational side of it up. And we have a DVD and a book, and it's all looking really good. And but Sam's and I, vision for it was pretty small. It was. Brass players will use this, but mostly low brass players will use it, and that's pretty much it. And, Sam was already using it with the concert jazz band at Arizona State and probably all the way back to Berkeley in the 70s as a rehearsal technique, and been using it in private lessons and clinics the whole time. And I was using it for sure, even in the Marine band. There was a high school behind me, Annandale High School, and I was doing breathing exercises with their horn line and the marching band. So we had been using it as a rehearsal technique, but our vision for it was what it was, and we were, we live in North America, so if you're Buddy Hackett, then you're Buddy Hackett forever. You can't ever not be Buddy Hackett. And so there's 2 high-profile tuba players. Like, how are we going to sell a book about breathing to music educators when we're thought of as tuba performers? And that's not really what our thought was. Our thought was, well, let's just get it out so we can sell it. And Tim Lotzenheiser, in his great wisdom, said, listen, we need to give everybody permission to buy this. And we were like, what do you mean permission? He goes, you need to just tell them it's okay. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he goes, well, let's just say it right on the cover of the book.
The yellow box.
If you look at the breathing gym, there's that little orange rectangle at the top,
Orange.
and it says for bands, orchestral winds, and choirs. That's from Tim Lotzenheiser. That's from, probably one of the greatest entrepreneurs that we have in the music business.
Yes.
And he just looked at it and said, listen, you just got to give everybody permission. Tell them it's okay. And so we put that box on there, and I'm telling you, I watched this happen thousands of times. People walk down the aisle at Midwest or at TMEA or FMEA or whatever MEA. They see a thing about breathing. They pick it up. They look at the top and they read the box out loud. Hey, Bobby, look at this. It says for winds and orchestral winds and choir. Hey, we should get this.
I love
that's
you,
it.
You
That's
told
it.
you told that story in the interview for my tuba book, and I've referenced that box. I've been calling it the yellow box, but it's orange. That orange box, that tidbit I mention in every single music marketing talk that I give anywhere. Yeah, that's so simple, but it's that's
give them
brilliant.
permission. To give them permission, tell them it's okay. It's like, oh, you guys are tuba players, but it's for us. It says it's for band right there on the cover.
Right.
So I think that's one of the reasons that it that was sort of maybe the threat of marketing. I think the darker answer to that is that. When you go to music school to study to be an educator, you go to the school of criticism. Hey, that's flat. Hey, that's sharp. Hey, you're early. Hey, you're late. Hey, that's not quite in tune. If we get somebody with less quality ears, or
it's a little pitchy. That's the. I think that's.
Thanks, J-Lo. And right, and so it's all about, hey, this isn't right. Please fix it. This isn't right. Please fix it. You know what I mean? That's what I hear in my head when I say, I have a master's in wind conducting. I have a DMA in wind conducting. I think you're like a critic. And obviously, how many critics do we still have in the United States working in newspapers? Not very many.
Right.
So that's what your future is. I think that what is being taught as a general tool for making music better is music criticism. Music noticing. I'm an observant person. That's flat. Rather than teaching tools that are practical that work. And I think that is the heart of the success of the breathing gym. It is a simple, practical tool. When it is understood by the practitioner and prescribed in the correct way, it is a beautiful, simple tool that takes care of an enormous amount of minutia that we've been taught as when you go to music school as a music critiquer that we need to care about. And it solves all those things. And so people that are working in music education, you're married to the mob as I am.
Right.
Both of our spouses are music educators. It's an onslaught. It's a total war to be that person in a school. And so the more tools that you can have that are quick and simple and actually work and stick around to improve your band frees you up for the war that is every other part of the job.
Yeah.
And if you've got a 45-minute rehearsal 3 days a week or 2 days a week or 1 day a week with your students, and you're looking down and all you hear is out of tune, flat, sharp, early, late, bad release, bad attack, articulations are bad, you don't even know your sharps, blah, blah, blah. It's a laundry list too long to be able to accomplish in that short amount of time. And something that's much more simple and practical solves these problems for people. And you set up a trust connection with the music educators. This is the thing that the Bluesy Hawks never understood when they were sponsoring me for the years that they did to go out. And they said, Pat, we need you to go out and talk about tubas. And I'm like, I'm at a school. They know that I know about tubas. I'm at a school helping a band director with how their band sounds. And if that works and they trust me, they're going to come back to me for the next 25 years and they're going to ask me what clarinets to buy, what flutes to buy, what tubas to buy, what everything to buy. If I go there and talk about tubas, I'm Buddy Hackett all over again.
Right.
And you guys are paying for a really narrow slice of the potential of what you could get from me.
Sure.
They never understood that. That's the thing that Jupiter has been so great with.
Right.
Is that the bottom line for them is sell instruments, of course, but their connection with the industry is about, we're here to solve problems for you in the band room. And they really mean it.
Right.
And they stand behind it. And that for me was, so that, when I was wanting to have a connection with a musical instrument company, it was easy to look at them and find that desirable, because I was like, well, that's just what I was been trying to, to peddle for so long. It's like, listen, if you want a relationship with the band director long term about that's on a trust level, then you need to go in there and solve something for them and do it in a quick and efficient way. And so the breathing gym allowed for that connection to happen every time. So this beautiful, wonderful network family of music educators all over the planet who have invited Sam or myself or both of us into their band rooms for a period of time and let us help them. And it's something that sticks around and works for them over and over and over and over again. I think that's the, at the bottom end. And I wish that it was, that those things were taken care of on the university level, but I think they're not. Yeah. I know they're not. I know they're not. So since there's a vacuum there, there's opportunities in that area. So that's really to go a circle all the way back to your thing about like, well, how did you find the market? It was like, hey man, the market for the brass gym, the breathing gym, any kind of music that we've written, all the things that we've produced have been because there's a lack of it coming from somewhere else. Educationally, there's a hole there, and so that's the. And again, if you're looking for those types of opportunities or thinking in that way, then those are the it leads you in those directions. If you're thinking about like, what am I going to play on my next recital, or which consortium can I participate in? That's a different part of the business. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. For me, it's very much a side part. It's not central to connection. So anyway, that's my answer to you on that.
No, it's great. It's absolutely possible to do what has been done before you better than it's ever been done, and that is a way to separate people from their money, and also to the less cynical way to put that is to make a difference and to impact people, etc. But when you identified a need, really, and you also. You not only identified the need, and yes, you marketed it really well with the orange box, but if the product, of course, isn't there, and that's like the underlying thing with marketing is it doesn't matter how slick your website is. If you're not good at what you do, then it doesn't really matter. But you offered the breathing gym offers a very simple solution to a whole lot of problems, some of which can be very complex on an individual, student by student, but also for the entire ensemble basis. And I know. For me, I've done, like a 10-minute routine that I've seen either you or Sam or JD Shaw or whatever do, like with a marching band before, which is all rapid fire and this, and then have them play something, and it's louder and with a better sound than that band has ever played with before, and you can see like every single face just lights up, and they're ready to run through a wall for you at that point. And then they're ready to run through a wall for their director, and then they go and practice more, and then they're paying more attention to their footwork, and absolutely everything. It kind of just all goes boom at that point, and that's the beauty of the product. And it's also cool how you've I love the daily workouts DVD. You obviously again identified some sort of the first DVD was like a kind of all-inclusive long. It was like 2 hours, right? If I remember correctly.
It's a kind of a survey of the whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah, which is super useful. And it's great, and it's kind of like a deep dive on all that stuff because you're talking about it, and there's a few students who are now not at all students anymore, but that were all friends of mine who are on there, and but then the daily workouts DVD is fantastic. It's like all 2-3 minute routines that you can do, and there's multiple routines for specific problems so that students, if you do the same 3 or 4 exercises at the beginning of every band class or lesson or master class or whatever, then the kids know what's coming. They start to kind of take shortcuts, not maliciously. They just kind of start to check out a little bit. And if they don't know what's coming and you keep on changing the sequences and all that stuff, then you keep them on their toes. And you guys identified that and put out a beautiful product along those lines as well.
That was a matter of just listening to the customers. The main customers became music educators.
Right.
We still sell a lot of those things to wind players and individuals, but it's I would say it's more popular with music educators.
Sure.
They were on the faculty at a couple different places, like the American Band College, a couple of these wonderful practical summer events, and the teachers are telling us, hey, I've been using the breathing gym for a few years, and before every class, I take 2 minutes and I figure out which exercises I'm going to do. It would be really cool if you guys just developed sequences that would be helpful to us, so that I wouldn't, so that it would be like, it would help us know how you guys combine them, so that we could use them, and then when we felt more comfortable making our own sequences, we would know what to model from. And we heard it over and over and over and over again. It would be really great if we had sequences that were really short, because my class is only so long and I only get to see them a couple days a week, and I really want to adopt your program, but I don't have 10 minutes to do this. I only have 3 or 6 or 4 or whatever. So we responded with a product that matched what we were hearing from the music educators in terms of what they needed. So that was completely developed for that purpose, to show people, like, okay, this is how Sam and Pat, when we're on our own or we're together and we're shedding something, this is what we do. Oh, I need to work on better phrasing. Okay, here's a sequence that'll help me phrase better. Or I need to play louder here. Here's a sequence that'll help me play louder, or soft sustain, or whatever, whatever the musical application was how we tried to, put a series of sequences together, really as like, hey, this is how we practice,
Right. Yeah, good. So speaking of band directors, can you, I wanted to give you a chance to put in a plug for this, and also just kind of talk about how it came about, and then we're going to let you on your way here about this Band Director Academy, which
Sure.
My wife is really ticked off that she can't go. She'd be there in a heartbeat, but Virginia schools go
Still
to school
in
until about like August 1st. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, it's not good. There was a lot of snow too. So she can't make it. But this Band Director Academy, June 16 to 19 at the University of Oregon. If you could just kind of talk about that, because it sounds like an awesome thing.
Sure. Yeah, this stems from really getting more and more involved at the American Band College with Max McKee and all the great things that program does for so many band directors. And so I went the one year, I think it might have been 2002, and I taught a tuba clinic and did some breathing things, and but then sort of got, if you do well at ABC, you get brought into the family, and then you keep coming back. And so the next time I went back with Sam, and they gave us the intercession, which is the 2-day intensive program that you get with the music educators after their first week, where they have the indoor concert, and before they sort of roll into the 4th of July series that they do. And so there's a 2-day session, and it's not required of all the participants, but most people participated. So I think the first year we had, if there were 200 students at the program, we had 190 or something. And it was a big room full of music educators, and we did our 2-day thing, and we got to the end. And several people, it's like, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? And you've been there, and it's like a retreat, it's like,
It's awesome.
People
it's
start
great.
to testify, right?
Yeah.
So people were like, hey, when can we come to your camp? When can we do this for several days with you guys? When are you guys going to start your own sort of summer thing? Because I'm going to finish my master's here, but I'm still going to need hours for recertification, and I'm still going to need to, take some graduate credit every now and then to keep my teaching license up to date. And I'd like to do it with you guys. So we heard that a lot. So in 2006, we were going to do this at the same place that we're doing it this summer. And Bob Ponto was then the director of bands at the University of Oregon, and we had the postcards out, and we had registrations, and it was gonna go down. And then I think somebody from Bob's family got ill. I think it was one of his parents, and he got super busy, as you would when that happens. And Sam and I were both at that moment, 2006. Man, we were both running 100,000 miles an hour in our own personal careers. And when you launch something, it needs tending to. A young garden needs to be watched every day.
Sure.
So it didn't go down. We had to cancel it. And so it sort of has sat on this back burner, and it's been one of the things that I've really, really, really wanted to do for a long time, because I hear from my wife, all the time. I was like, I went to this in-service today, and I was like, well, what was it about? She's like, not about being a band director.
Breathing from the diaphragm.
It was about, or some sort of new, grading system or whatever. And it's, something that doesn't have anything to do with music.
Sure.
And improving your what you can do in the classroom, something practical. And I've always been, that's the thing I was attracted to. It was like, man, if we could what are we going to do for these, these music educators that they've finished their masters from ABC? That was really the thought of just the net of the ABC alums, and
such a great
providing
program.
them with a place to be able to go continue to do what they do. And for me, to this day, the most transformational moments for me in music as a student, when I learn something about how to run an ensemble, is when I am in an ensemble. And I think that's what ABC does so great. You sit in class all day long, and there's all these great experts that they bring in, and at the end, in the middle of the day, and at the end of the day, they're in a band rehearsal with their instrument, playing music, connecting to the process that brought them in the front door as a music educator in the first place.
And seeing not just the experts, the experts that talked about it, and then a lot of those same experts are actually not just talking about what they do, but then doing it and in front of them and to them.
Yeah, and they get to feel it. They get to feel it. So, we get to do what we do in music because we had teachers that took care of us and tended to us.
Yes.
And I feel like that, on a large earth, global level, so many of these crazy things that are going on are, directly related to the lack of cultural involvement. And if we can make it easier for the teachers to do their jobs than in the places where they've wised up and they're like, okay, it's fourth grade, everybody's got to pick band, orchestra, or choir, that the rate of drop off would be much less, and there would be more people involved in music, and it would make just the world period a better place. So I'm intensely interested in making the war that is being a band director on a daily basis more practical and easier, so that people enjoy it and they stick in the business longer. But I'm also interested in it from the standpoint of, I've got all kinds of friends that play in this community band that I have the fortune of conducting, called the Salt River Brass, and they're all band directors, and they're all trying to be good at what they do, and they feel like that the resources for them on a practical level, other than getting a master's degree, or a heaven forbid that other one, that they would like to have a place to go hone their skills and refine their skills that are in their subject area. And so that's when I went to ABC, that's the part that's like, these people, they turn into kids again. They turn into band geeks all over again. They pick up their horn, they sit down in the band, and they become a bando all over again. So that for me was like, okay, that's the platform for working on practical information about how to run a band better. People have to experience it from behind the instrument. So that's what we're going to do at Band Director Academy. We're basically going to prepare a concert, but along the way, over the course of those 4 days, with Bob Ponto and Rodney Dorsey, who's the current director of bands at the University of Oregon, and Sam and myself, we are going to have a few clinics and workshops, but in between, it's going to be mainly rehearsals, and the rehearsals will be dedicated to and then name a subject. So today's next hour and a half will be brought to you by Tone. And then the four of us will take moments from that rehearsal and rehearse the band on a repertoire that we'll play on Friday, but only be talking about aspects of how to improve tone in the context of a rehearsal. And then another rehearsal would be about rhythm or releases or articulation or whatever. So there's a laundry list of things we're going to cover in a practical way. And that's my hope is, it's the thing that I do when I'm on the road. I mean, I was just in Keller, Texas, and I was at Timber Creek High School and Central High School, outside of north of Fort Worth. The places where they, let me stand up in front of the band and work the band, they were looking at me like, wow, these are great techniques. Where can I learn more about how to do this? And this is what I've been hearing for years and years and years. So again, this Band Director Academy is a response to that of, really the ABC alums, as well as, clients that I go to work for, where they see me in work their bands for one day in a 1 hour, each band for an hour. And they're like, I think I'd like to have more of that. Where can I do that? So this is a response to that. And, the short-term goal is the 5-year goal is to get it really cooking at the University of Oregon. I know that it's an earlier week. It's one of those, I think, the weeks that'll start to tweak to have a roving faculty over the long term, so people can keep coming back to it over and over and have a different set of faculty and work to refine and hone their practical skills for being a band director. Right. If it has some traction, and can solidify itself as a business, then we'll for sure go bi-coastal and move it around the country, and bring it closer to folks. But we went back to the University of Oregon. The organization itself is super easy to integrate with. Right. And Bob Ponto's one of my favorite people in music.
He's awesome.
It was kind of one of those things that had been left on the table. Like, he said it when we talked about this in January. It's like, my soul still needs to do this. We need to have this. It was one of those things that kind of felt like unrequited,
Right.
And so we're coming back to it, and we've got enough of a registration for this summer to make a nice sized band, and so I'm hoping that people enjoy it, and that it has some traction, because I'm really the folks that I want to work with, that I have lined up for future faculties, and the folks that we're working with this summer, and that we'll hopefully get to work with every summer with Rodney and Bob, I feel like the people in the business that get it, and they want to be practical, and they want to be connected to the end game, and however they can make that happen in an efficient way is what they want to be involved in. And so that's really what it's about. It's about putting it in that kind of context. I love going to things like Midwest and TMEA and those types of MEAs where you get to hear clinical approaches. But I know from being at things like ABC, or going to a school for an entire band camp week, that to get a chance to see it and then practice it and have an exchange and some fellowship about the information, and then to feel it for yourself when you play your instrument, is a much deeper hook set for utilizing these pedagogical techniques than a 1 hour flash and trash, entertainment clinic at an MEA, which Sure. That's a whole nother subject. But I mean, that's what those are. The most successful clinics at a conference are really recitals. They're performances, and that's what makes them engaging, because 45 minutes to try to get a point across that took you a whole lifetime to accumulate. So,
right.
So it has to take the form of a piece of entertainment, right. Not so much, okay, I'm going to walk out and be an expert and know how to apply this and use it every day. So, right. So Bob Ponto was the director of bands at the University of Oregon for a long time. Rodney's had a huge career in public education before he came to the University of Oregon. Sam Palafian, other than all his chamber work and his great teaching as a brass player, and many people don't know this, is a wonderful, wonderful conductor. Not right. so much in how it looks with the baton, but in terms of how he runs a rehearsal.
Oh yeah,
took the Arizona State University Concert Jazz Band to several festivals. They won several competitions. He knows how to turn a group into a highly polished ensemble and give enough information from the podium to create a sense of follow, and enough and not enough to create a sense of ownership from the players. So right. He's a really interesting person in the mix in terms of teaching ensemble, because you would not ordinarily think of Sam as a conductor, and right. yet I would absolutely think of him as one of the top 5 people that I know in my life that could improve an ensemble in under 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, that makes him a conductor
sure.
automatically. And it's to sort of get on at that philosophy. There's so many symposiums across the country that are about movement and how you look and how you move to conduct, and that's wonderful. That is absolutely one of the tools you need to have.
It's important,
but this is also a reaction to that too, which is like, hey, there's more than the school of criticism. This is late, this is flat, this is sharp. You should tune that,
right?
And it should look like this. And when my hands do this, it means that. Okay, so remember that. I'm like that. I'm sorry, that's like, it doesn't work for me. I feel like that doesn't quite get at the depth of the practical nature of what we could get at. But you have to let go of a few things, Sure. And you have to trust the process. I mean, to some of the folks that have jumped in that have used it long term, like Jim Hudson, using the breathing gym with the marching band at Arizona State University for this 9 years, 6 minutes at the front of every rehearsal, and then with some integration throughout in a rehearsal technique that doesn't interrupt the flow of a normal ensemble rehearsal for a marching group, for example, he gets it. He's like, oh man, this builds on itself year after year, and you develop a culture for it, and then the ones that are going to be gravitated toward it anyway, they become your staff, and then you have an army of people all teaching and pulling the rope in the same way. It's all going the same way. And I've seen this in several districts across the country too, where American Band College students or just people that are like-minded will sort of cloister in a district and try to make sure that all the new hires are coming in from the avenues that are, quote unquote, pre-approved. So they sort of build a team across an entire district of people that are all teaching from the same philosophy, teaching the same way, and then having that idea that, like, hey, we should be talking to our colleagues more than just at the MEA. That I can call my friend 25 minutes before their marching band rehearsal, which is the same time as mine, and go, hey, I'm doing this today. What do you think of this? Oh, I'm trying this. That there should be some sort of, water cooler fellowship happening that happens normally in an environment where you work with all professionals that are all your age. And when you're a teacher, especially a music teacher, you're geographically isolated in the building, right. And which makes automatically, my wife's, this is the second year at the school where she's at now, teaching general music and beginning band, and she's still meeting teachers. She's still seeing people on campus like, oh, I haven't met you before. Yeah. It's because she's the music room is way on the other side of campus from where everything else is going on, and so, it's one of those things where I think that idea, that's one of the things that makes these summer programs so powerful for people, is they get a chance to finally connect with each other and have some exchange about, like, how are you doing this and how are you solving this? And so I'm happy to be part of developing another platform for opportunity for music educators in that regard.
That's great.
So if you're available June 16 to 19 and want to come out and hang out with Bob Poncho and Rodney Dorsey and myself and Sam Palafian, you can go to banddirectoracademy.com and register, and we'll be there this summer. And this is a 5-year plan for me for sure, so we're definitely around for at least another 4 to see if we can get some traction and if there's an audience for what we're offering.
Well, that's great. We're a little bit long, but I really quickly, the last question I wanted to ask you, are there any books that business related, entrepreneurship related, whatever, motivational, that you've either read recently or in the past that you would recommend to somebody that's kind of starting out in trying to create different products like you have?
Well, Seth Godin's a great resource.
Yep.
His blog is an online MBA.
Oh, it's incredible.
That would be one of my first stops.
Yeah.
And anything he's written, that's all wonderful stuff.
I just read Lynchpin, like I finished it 2 days ago, and my mind was absolutely blown away. It's unbelievable.
It's great. There's also a thing that he wrote. I don't know that it's published. I think I have it as a PDF. I downloaded it from his website. This is Manifesto on Education.
Right.
It's a 10,000 word expose on sort of why standardized testing is the way it is, and how it was developed, and why we should get the hell away from it.
Right.
So I love that. I love him, and the information is really on target. I think. For musicians, the talent code is an important one to read, and anything that Coyle has put out.
Yeah, that's a great
Daniel
book.
Coyle.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great inspiration in terms of like what's possible, and stop reading and go to work. Stop reading this book and go to work.
Right.
Go practice.
Right.
Cool. I'm trying to think of some other things that I've it's mostly vegan cookbooks lately. That's mostly what I've been reading. So that's not too interesting for the topic that we're on.
That's pretty funny.
I'm enjoying a book right now by a tuba playing colleague of ours that has gone deeply into the practice of yoga. Ted Cox wrote a book called The Warrior Self.
Oh, really?
And I'm not very far into it because it's it's decoding yoga philosophy, and he does it in a really wonderful and beautiful and practical way. But I'm a tuba player. I'm not terribly philosophical, so I have to, go slow. And there are no pictures in the book, so I have to go really slow. So,
I did not know that he wrote a book. There you go.
Yeah, he did. I've gone through the first 4 chapters, and it's really good.
Right.
So I'm enjoying that just from a sort of a self-improvement and get your brain together standpoint. Man, I'm totally drawing a blank.
Oh, that's a bunch of really good stuff.
Yeah, I would say, the thing that I keep going back to on a regular basis is the book that I reference all the time, that kind of a companion to the Breathing Gym, which is The Structures and Movement of Breathing, which is by Barbara Conable. She's retired now. She's a great Alexander teacher and choral director, and wrote this wonderful, simple, beautiful little 47-page book about your pulmonology and how to be thinking about it the right way. And she has a great website called bodymap.org. There's a huge bibliography there. And so I'm routinely have some sort of anatomy or physiology or kinesiology text or book or what every dancer should know about their body, or these types of texts going in my brain all the time, because I'm, meeting and teaching different types of instruments and people all the time, and picking up some of their nomenclature and being able to reference. I worked not long ago with a wonderful clarinet player, and they were having some issues with tensions in a certain part of their body, and I was like, well, I don't know how to play the clarinet, so started to hold a clarinet, and then I was like, oh, okay, I need to know more about this. So I looked at the different anatomy and mostly kinesiology texts that I have about the shoulders and the elbows, and was able to get a better grasp of like, okay, this is the difference about playing a clarinet than holding a tuba.
Right.
In terms of the underlying, not in terms of the obvious optics of it.
Right.
So those are kind of constantly going, but
great.
The biggest thing for me lately has been writing. I got a concert today. We're doing my arrangement of pictures at an exhibition, and
cool.
Shostakovich Concertino, and I rescored Stephen Bryant's Dusk, and so the last 6 months has been me and Finale and
and vegan food
and vegan cookbooks. Yeah, that's it, man.
Excellent. Well, Pat, thank you so much for sharing, all of your wisdom and experience and energy and a passion for creating and all of that with us. And I'm sure that everybody out there listening just learned a lot, because I know that I just did. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks. You've been listening to The Entrepreneurial Musician with Andrew Hitz on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter and find my blog at andrewhitz.com. You can also find me at facebook.com/hitztuba, and I'm at hitztuba on Twitter. The Entrepreneurial Musician is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producer is Andrew Hitz. The theme music was performed by Ben Barron, Rich Kelly, Daniel Lapel, and Andrew Hitz. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.